Hello friends, I hope all of you are fine. My name is Harshit Dwivedi and I again welcome you to my audio tutorials. In this audio tutorial, it is a very short one, maybe of 5 or 7 minutes. And in this audio tutorial, I will tell you about Pitt's India Act of 1784. Pitt's India Act of 1784. So, this was also a very important act from the perspective of governance in India by the Britishers and the East India Company. Through this act, direct control of the East India Company over India was further diluted. That means the control of East India Company was gradually reduced and the control of British government was gradually increased in comparison to the Regulating Act of 1773. Or in other words, we can also say that more and more centralization of powers was happening. The most important feature of this act was that the territory that was occupied by the East India Company in India was for the first time termed as British territory or British possessions in India. British possessions in India. Second most important feature of this act was that the British government established total and supreme control over the administrative and political affairs of the East India Company in India. So, the two main important features of this Pitt's India Act were that for the first time that the territory that was being ruled by East India Company from 1765, that was for the first time called the British possessions or British territories, and the British government established total and supreme control over the administrative and political affairs of the company. Now, some more important features were also there of this Pitt's Act which are very relevant from our studies point of view, especially for civil services and PCS examination. So, I will distinguish these features into two parts. The first was that the political and commercial functions of the East India Company were distinguished and demarcated. That is, they were separated. The political and commercial functions of the company were separated. And the second most important characteristic of Pitt's India Act of 1784 was that in addition to the Court of Directors, a new body named as Board of Control was created by the British government, which was entrusted with the task of managing the political affairs of the British possessions in India, whereas the Court of Directors was allowed to manage the commercial affairs. So this is one of the most important points. We know that in the previous audio tutorial of Regulating Act of 1773, I have already told that Court of Directors was the governing council of the East India Company. Now, Court of Directors was already operating in India. In addition to that body, a new body named as Board of Control, BOARDOFCONTROL, Board of Control was created by the British government, the task of which was to manage the political affairs of the British possessions in India. Whereas the governing council of the East India Company, that is the Court of Directors, was allowed to manage the commercial affairs. So, in short, we can say that through this Pitt's India Act of 1784, the control of British government over the functioning of East India Company was considerably increased. Although the East India Company was allowed to manage the commercial affairs, But all the important tasks like the civil affairs, military affairs, revenue affairs, these matters, the supervisions of these matters was being given to the Board of Control. So the Board of Control was also entrusted with the task of managing the political affairs and to supervise the administrative affairs of the civil, military and revenue. And the most important functional area of the Court of Directors, that is the East India Company, was to manage the commercial affairs. So, in this act, in short, I am revising it, that political and commercial functions of the East India Company were distinguished and separated. A new body, Board of Control, was created in addition to Court of Directors by the British government, and the main function of Board and Control was to manage the political affairs of the British possessions or British territories in India and to supervise and direct all the civil affairs, military affairs and revenue affairs. So indirectly, everything except commercial affairs was in the hands of the Board of Control and ultimately the British government. So these were the most important characteristics of the Pitt's India Act of 1784. So in this act, we can sum up that whatever small drawbacks or bottlenecks that were left open in the Regulating Act of 1773 were mended in this act. Because in the Regulating Act of 1773, in spite of the changes made, the control was in the hands of the East India Company. While in this act, Pitt's India Act of 1784, the control was out of the hands of East India Company except the commercial functions. So, the British government established its control over political functions, civil functions, military functions and revenue functions. That was the most important. So, East India Company through this act was changed to a purely administrative body in the domain of commercial functions. So these were the important characteristics of Pitt's India Act. In my next audio tutorial, I will cover Charter Act of 1833. So thank you for listening to this audio tutorial. My name is Harshit Dwivedi. We will meet soon. Okay, bye. Hello friends, I hope